Hey, we're at MAGFest 2020 talking to K-Murdock, who just had a show on the main stage last night. Thanks for talking to us.
Of course, man.
Do you want to just give a background of how you got into music in general?
My background into how I got into music, I grew up, my uncle was I'm from Washington, D.C. He was a pretty famous local radio disc jockey, and I wanted to be just like him. So I basically, anytime I was over his house, I just found myself going into his record collection, and he was known for creating the radio format known as the Quiet Storm, which is like the late night slow jams, what they call the baby music. So a lot of the music I grew up in was like slow soul and stuff like that. And being an 80s baby, grew up listening to a lot of hip hop. So naturally, I noticed in hip hop, a lot of the people were sampling the music I grew up listening to. So it was like this cool kind of convergence of like literally the stuff I was weaned off of, as well as the stuff that naturally kind of came up into that kind of created my style. And then fused that with, I was a big gamer, still am when I can be. And all that kind of became like an amalgamation of like what I do now, which is like fusing anime and anime and video games into the style of music I do, which is really hip hop. So
okay, that's awesome. So so you were into video games. What got you into like the video game music scene?
My homie Megaran, who's like a pretty big name in like the scene, particularly the subgenre nerdcore. About 10 years ago, we did an album. We were talking, not to date ourselves, but on MySpace when that was a thing. And he had just launched the first Megaran album. And I just thought it was cool. I was like, oh man, like, you know, this guy is a gamer obviously, but he's a astute hip hop head, and he kind of fused them. So we were talking, I was like, I've kind of always been into this stuff too, and I really even wanted to sample from video games, but I thought that stuff was too kind of like, you know, subversive or whatever. So he was like, you know, we should do an album together where you would take some samples from like video games you liked, and as opposed to taking jazz records and soul records, you know, use that as like the base of the sampling. So we did, it became an album called Forever Famicom. And that was 2010, so actually this year in 2020, we're celebrating like the 10-year anniversary of it. And it was like a milestone thing, so that kind of was my gateway, I guess, into the world of nerdcore and sampling video games, and landing me at places like MAGFest.
Awesome. Yeah, and so like since you've been involved, it seems like you've sort of curated a pretty cool group of musicians around you. What kind of like strategies do you have for like, you know, collaborating with other musicians? How do you get like a team like that?
When people ask me what I do, I say I'm a modern musician, which is just a nice like euphemistic way of saying I don't play anything per se, I sample, right? So, but I have a lot of friends who do play instruments, from keyboards, guitars, and bass to, I know a lot of friends who play all sections of a brass band, you know, like from trombone to saxophone, even friends who dabble with like electronic instruments and wind instruments and whatnot. So, for instance, my set on MAGFest was kind of like a great example of that, because I did an album 4 years ago now called Hero Music, which samples the character themes from Chrono Trigger. And in doing it, I took the original samples from the game, or music from the game, and kind of remixed it. But I garnished it with like live instrumentation that you also heard when we did the set last night. So, you know, I didn't want to just, especially I'm at a venue like MAGFest on the main stage, I didn't want to just stand up there with my sampler or DJ rig. I brought on the people who actually play on records to kind of give it a bigger sound. So a lot of times that's how it starts. So I might have a sample, which is a sketch, and then I'll actually come to a friend of mine who can play that instrument over and relay them over it. Or a lot of times they might be so good, I'll just erase the sample and just kind of build from what they play of their original riff, you know?
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
And you talked about MySpace as a platform for collaboration. Are there any other like platforms or communities you're aware of that you're involved in, or do you just sort of have your own little circle of people?
A good one that Bandcamp is a good one, or SoundCloud rather, should I say. SoundCloud is probably better because it's more community-based. Bandcamp is just like where you go to get the music. SoundCloud is like another kind of community-based thing where people can just post everything from just finished songs to like works in progress. And it's real big about like, you can search on there for almost any kind of really weird niche subgenre, and it's like music on there. And then once you find it, unlike Bandcamp, where, I mean, you can message people, it's like set up so like you can reply or comment on a track and all that stuff. So, and I mean, SoundCloud's been around for years, so it's not new, but I think it's a good resource for people to find, particularly with subgenres such as nerdcore or like any kind of indie music. And a lot of the burgeoning stuff that becomes like the pop music usually starts on places like SoundCloud. And then I think for more traditional people, so me as a hip hop person, SoundCloud works. For more traditional people who are into music composition and remixing, this OC Remix, which is really big. It's been around for years. And yeah, OC Remix, a lot of people come from that era. Danny Baranovsky, Danny B, who scored The Binding of Isaac and
the Necrodancer.
Yes, yep. He's Meat Boy. He was the original sound person who did the compositions for Super Meat Boy. He came from that OC Remix stuff, and it's just interesting when I talk to him about like their community versus like a person like myself who does more hip hop remixing, and even the name remix means so many different things, like from OC remix to the style of remix that I do, which is very different. So it's something for everybody out there. You just gotta kind of find your niche and go from there.
Awesome, cool.
Yeah.
So like, what are you looking forward to at MAGFest now that you finish your set?
Man, just relaxing and being like a patron and a fan. Tonight I'm checking out some other friends who performed on my set, or IQ and Samus, two other dope artists who are kind of in that world of video games and hip hop, or just nerd culture and hip hop, because IQ is really big into Attack on Titan and anime. He's an otaku, and Samus is real big on everything from, she's obviously her namesake is from Metroid, but she's really into political stuff to video games, and I mean, she runs the gamut. And she's a PhD, so she's like very much, like myself, into education, so.
Awesome,
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks for talking to us, K-Murdock. Have a good
No problem, man.
rest of
Thank you,
MAGFest.
man.